Is Psychopaths worth watching? Well, let's see. Justice and the enforcement of it has changed. In the 22nd century, Japan enforces the Sybil system, an objective means of determining the threat level of each citizen by examining their mental state for signs of criminal intent. This is known as their psychopaths. Inspectors uphold the law by subjugating, often with lethal force, anyone harboring the slightest ill will. Alongside them are enforcers, jaded inspectors that have become latent criminals, granted relative freedom in exchange for carrying out the inspector's dirty work. Into this world steps Akane Tsunemori, a young woman with an honest desire to uphold justice. However, as she works alongside veteran enforcer Shinya Kogami, she soon learns that the Sybil system's judgments are not as perfect as her fellow inspectors assume. With everything she has known flipped upside down, Akane wrestles with the question of what justice truly is and whether it can be upheld through the use of a system that may already be corrupt. As you can see, this anime has a fantastic concept and premise. It's set in a futuristic city where the crime rate has dropped dramatically and justice is almost perfectly upheld by the Sybil system. However, nothing is perfect, and that includes Sybil. We get a wonderful dynamic between the two main characters, Kogami and Akane. Kogami is what you could call old school. He's definitely seen some things. He knows what he's talking about, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. He is very strong-willed, and he steals the show every scene that he's in. Then you have Akane. She is new to the police force and starts out quite naive. She is very smart, but has a hard time coming to terms with the fact that Sybil, this perfect crime detecting system, isn't quite everything she thought it would be. There is a constant back and forth between trusting what Sybil says about a case or a person and what you can clearly see with your own eyes. This makes the first season incredibly easy to binge and rewatch again and again. You also have the rest of the main squad comprised of Ginaza, Kaguri, Masaoka, Kunizaka, and Kuranamori. Ginaza is a young and stubborn detective that has good reasons for why he acts the way he does, and these are revealed throughout the first season. Starting Akane out as a naive new inspector and having Ginaza as a stubborn, more uptight leader is quite risky in my opinion, as it opens the door to massive character growth and development, but if the anime fails to follow through, they can end up becoming really unlikable characters. However, it is fair to say that the show does a fantastic job of developing and building upon these base character traits that each character starts out with. Kaguri is a hilarious young gun enforcer that is full of energy. He's always making light of the situation, and he brings a ton of color to each episode that he's in. Old Masaoka is a grizzled veteran enforcer. He's much older and more experienced than the rest of the crew. He has a lot of advice to give, and it does not take long for you to get invested in him and just excited to spend more time with him on screen. Kunizaka is very quiet and reserved, but she fulfills her role on the team very well and brings a strong female character to the table that can complement the mainly male task force. And lastly, there is Kuranamori, who is great with computers and hacking. She is a bit much at times and isn't quite as good as the rest, but still ends up being fine overall. This brings us to the final character worth mentioning, and that is the main villain, Makishima. He is quite the compelling character and has an incredible dynamic with Kogami. The back and forth between them really drives the show and leads to a ton of next level scenes. His motivations are clear, and whether you love him or hate him, you know why he is doing what he's doing, and that truly makes a fantastic villain character. There is a scene where he basically looks at the Sybil system, this perfect upholder of justice, and calls everything it stands for into question. He's really everything you want in a villain character. As far as the animation and soundtrack go, they are both amazing. The openings and endings are way up there, and it is very hard to skip either of them for the first season, especially the openings. The first season of Psychopaths was released in 2012, and I feel like the animation style still holds up today. But enough about how incredible the first season is. What about the second and third season? So, season 1 has a total of 22 episodes, while season 2 only has 11. Now, this isn't the end of the world, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Since the first season was released in 2014, or I'm sorry, since the second season was released in 2014, the animation has taken a small jump and definitely holds up today. However, at what cost? Overall, the second season is an absolute disappointment, in my opinion. Not only does it fail to capitalize on almost all of the character growth we saw in the first season, but it introduces and essentially hands the keys of the anime over to one of the worst characters I have ever seen in any of the anime I have watched. That being Shimotsuki. She gets so much screen time and is incredibly frustrating to watch. You absolutely cannot go from Kogami and Akane to Shimotsuki and Sybil. It just can't happen. Nothing is her fault, and she is literally just an annoying puppet, and the pain never ends. All of the progress we made with Sybil is up in the air as we follow a new villain character in Kurito. Without spoiling anything, Kurito isn't a bad villain, it's just he doesn't compare to Makishima. There are moments where the second season really makes its mark, but that is all. As a whole, it fails to cash in on almost anything that made you love the first season. And that only leaves the third season of Psycho-Pass, which came out in 2019. It has 11 45-minute episodes, which is essentially 22 episodes, just like the first season. I will say that the animation is wonderful, and they do introduce two new main characters that really bring a lot to the table. Erida and Kei. Now, Erida is this little guy that has some form of supernatural ability that helps him solve cases, while Kei is an inspector who immigrated from outside the Sybil system. They have an incredible dynamic throughout, and I found myself way more invested in them than I thought I would be. Erida has more energy and passion, while Kei is more somber, stoic, and level-headed. But together, they navigate the cases and continue to raise questions about this quote-unquote perfect society that they have found themselves in. Unfortunately, Shimotsuki is still present and painful to watch, but she has so much less screen time to work with this time around. There's also a new villain character as well as villainous organization to deal with. And when I was about 75% done with this third season, I was actually getting pretty excited. It truly felt like things were turning around and we were making strides to repair what had been broken in season 2. However, the ending episodes of this third and final season are not satisfying at all. The conclusion it leaves you with and where the characters end up is just like, okay. It was much better than the second season, but still could not reach the heights that the first season was able to climb to. With all of that being said, I would say that the first season is incredibly close to perfect, while season 2 and season 3 both leave so much to be desired. So as far as Psycho-Pass goes, I would say season 1 is definitely worth watching, while season 2 and season 3 are probably not worth your time unless you really need to see it to believe it. As always, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and I will catch you on the flip. Peace.